Bottom line in business talk. Voice America Business.
Welcome back to Sales Talk with Russ Lombardo. If you have a question or comment, dial toll-free 866-472-5790. Now back to the show. Here's Russ.
Hi, welcome to Sales Talk, a bottom-line resource for sales management and sales professionals. Brought to you by our sponsor, CardScan. With CardScan, good things happen when you make data entry easy. I'm your host, Russ Lombardo of Peak Sales Consulting, and today's show is called Generate More Revenue Using Your Non-Sales Force. Now, think about this. Is your company leaving money on the table simply because your non-sales employees don't know what to say? Wouldn't you like to know how your non-sales employees can influence sales and customer retention opportunities? Whether your employees support customers, market products, manage projects, or provide consulting services, they can and should generate leads as well as recognize upsell and cross-sell opportunities and basically help you generate more revenue. Well, today we're going to discuss how to arm your current non-sales organization with the sales skills it needs to maximize the potential of every account. My guest today, Adam Halpern, founded SoftSell based on a basic truth of business. Every customer interaction is an opportunity to build a profitable relationship. SoftSell's common sense approach to sales training is a product of Adam's professional experience in organizational development and direct sales. For more than 12 years, he's worked with executive decision makers in training, sales, field marketing, and customer service. As a lead corporate trainer, he worked in extremely competitive business environments such as NetIQ, Symantec, and American Express. Please join me in welcoming today's guest, Adam Halpern, President and founder of SoftSell Training. Adam, welcome to our show.
Hi, Russ. Thanks for having me.
Well, glad you're here. There's going to be an exciting discussion today because everyone should know about their non-sales people. It's like an untapped resource, isn't it?
It's what I call the silent sales force.
The silent sales force. I like that, yes. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what SoftSell does to get this kicked off?
Sure. So, in a nutshell, we provide sales skills to non-sales people. And so our focus is primarily on individuals in the frontline employee staff area outside of the direct sales force.
So these are the people who say, I can never be in sales, and right? And they never will be in sales. But that doesn't mean they can't help and sell.
Exactly. In fact, these are people that usually have very strong customer relationships that can be capitalized on if they're trained to do so accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You got a good personality for that. Well, you know, Adam, the approach of training frontline non-sales staff seems very unique in the sales training world. How did it come about?
Well, it is, and I'll tell you, it didn't happen overnight. As you said, I've been doing this now for about 12 years, and it's really been an evolution. I actually got my start in the customer service industry, and it's there that I got a deep understanding of the mentality of the non-sales frontline personnel staff. And I'll tell you this, they definitely see selling a lot differently than your typical direct salesperson. So I spent about 4 years working with them and moving up in that organization, and eventually I was, as my support friends say, seduced by the dark side and decided to move over to the sales industry proper. And there I spent about 5 years pounding the street, really learning my craft, and took as much time as possible, took as many sales courses as possible, read as many sales books as I could, and really became obsessed with the art of selling. And it was then that I realized that even though my passion was teaching, I had to somehow find some way of bringing these things together. So it's really been a combination of my customer service background, my direct sales experience, and my passion for teaching. What that did was open me up to something that I saw happening in the organizational development field and corporate America in general, and that was that you saw, I don't know how many times I've been in an organization where I was at a meeting, and you'd be in an event, and they'd say, hey, we're all salespeople in this company.
Oh, yeah.
And yet no one would go back and train them.
Yeah.
And so they saw a need.
They want everyone to be in sales, right?
Exactly. And in defense of those people, they may even want to, but they just simply don't know how to. So I began to see this need and decided, you know what, I think there's an opportunity here, and we should put together an organization to go after it. And I should tell you, I'm not alone in this. CIO Magazine recently published an article in which they said CIOs are desperately seeking hires with project management skills and business skills that are necessary for the customer-facing roles that they're currently addressing. Over 60% of the job descriptions now require some kind of customer interfacing skill for technical jobs. Mm-hmm. In fact, McKinsey recently released a report, and they were recommending that many companies can incredibly increase their growth potential by simply turning their inbound call centers into revenue centers, by giving them sales training skills. So I guess my bottom line is, as you said earlier, every customer contact should be seen as a revenue opportunity.
Exactly. Is there kind of a controversy, too, though, with these call centers where management says, I don't want my people selling, I want them fixing problems? And aren't they the same managers who say, I want you to make 70 calls a day or take 70 calls a day, and they're more focused on quantity than quality?
Well, there's been a shift. In fact, I was speaking to VP of support the other day, and he said to me, I want my people to stop seeing their jobs as how fast can I close this ticket to how well can I educate our customer.
Oh, wow, that's a refreshing mentality there, isn't it?
Yep, it really is, and it just shows why it's critical to maximize this whole segment of the organization.
Right, yeah, and the scenario I just went through really exposes the kind of management mindset that looks at a call center, for instance, as a kind of one piece of a puzzle without looking at the big piece or the whole picture. And I guess what you're saying is something that we all know about, and or at least in what we do, right? Is that everybody has to help. There's no it's you versus them, and us versus them, and type of thing. Everyone's out there trying to acquire the customers and retain the customers.
Well, I'll tell you, we that are in sales, we're used to being on the front line, and let's face it, on the front line, you're either a hero or a zero.
Yeah.
But we don't really know what it's like to be in a cost center type atmosphere. And what these people discover very quickly, and particularly the management of the support service organizations, is that they now have an opportunity to contribute to the bottom line, and it gives them credibility in the organization, and quite frankly, they're looking for that.
Yeah.
There's kind of this built-in inferiority complex because sales gets all the notoriety, as well they should. They bring in the money.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And it's got to be fulfilling for them, too. I mean, call centers is a good example. It's almost a no-win situation. If they solve a problem, they're doing their job. If they don't, they're a loser. Right? I mean, it's
right.
like a no-win situation. So if they can contribute in other ways, and I like what you said, that VP of Service, was it, said that he wants people to not just look at it as how many tickets or how fast you close a ticket, but how much you can educate your client. I mean, that's very valuable, So let me ask you this: how is sales training for non-salespeople different than traditional sales training? Then,
well,
that was a devious laugh.
Yeah, anyone that's ever, and I'm assuming most people that are listening in have been in some kind of formal sales training, but all of us sales trainers know that basically when you walk in the room and you're going to train the direct sales force, there's kind of a invisible target on your chest, which basically says, take me down. And we all know it in the beginning, and we're all professionals and know how to diffuse that type of situation. But it's, training direct salespeople that have been doing this for 5-10 years, even new ones, they have a different mentality. So I actually enjoy training non-salespeople now more. It's just a completely different experience. Once they get comfortable with the concepts, they're kind of like a kid in a candy store. They tend to leave the training sessions highly energized, and quite frankly, they try and just go out there and sell the pants off anything. And I think this exuberance is coming from them overcoming these fears that they've had all this time about this concept of selling.
Because it's a stigma or more of a hidden mystery that those other people do when they're out playing golf and having lunches, right?
It's true, and it's very enlightening to talk with these people and see how they perceive sales. First of all, they think it's easy until they get into a role-play situation and realize really how hard it is. And second of all, my first course is literally called Sell is a 4-letter word, but it's not evil. And we just have to help them get comfortable with this concept of selling, even if it means using different language, which I've had to do in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's key, using different language. What type of people, we kept talking about customer service and call centers and stuff like that. What other type of people would be considered a non-sales salesperson? Are we talking receptionist? Or, what kind of you run into? Is there a trend?
Well, this is interesting. In fact, there's an article that I read recently that has to do actually with the Marines, which I thought was kind of timely considering what's going on. And the Marines train everyone, including their cooks, how to fight. And the idea is that if the front line is broken through and the enemy gets through, you still have to be able to fight. And, granted, I don't consider myself a Marine, and, we take away some of the bravado and some of the medals, but the idea is still the same for a company. Everyone in the organization, at the very least, should have the basic selling skills to at least find opportunity, if not, actually be able to present an upsell or cross-sell situation.
Exactly.
So, we tend to think more of corporate America, but quite frankly, I work with organizations that have plumbers that go out, right? And the plumber's out on site and fixes the sink and notices that there's a leak in the bathroom. It doesn't, basically as long as there's someone interacting with the customer, they have an opportunity to upsell or cross-sell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And part of it, too, is just caring, too, right? They have to actually care. I mean, I say that because I've had people in my house doing some work, and they can look around. I look at these things because that's what I do, right? And I watch how people behave in our industry, and I go, here's a customer service opportunity. Let's see what he does or she does, and they don't do it. And I go, you know why they didn't do it? Either because they didn't know they can or didn't learn how to, but a big part of it is they just don't care. They're in there doing their job and leaving because there's no incentive for them to do that.
And I'm glad you said that last piece, because I'm not sure they don't care as much as they're just not incented to think that way, and they've never been even asked to think that way. Mm-hmm. I recently had someone come out and install some alarm equipment in my house, and quite frankly, he was one of the best salespeople I've ever worked with. Mm-hmm. He asked me open-ended questions, he was empathetic to my needs, and then he presented a solution that made sense. He didn't get paid for it. Of course, I asked him for his manager's number to find out why he shouldn't be starting to get paid for it. But that just shows you that there's just so many opportunities where once the initial sale is done, you still want to continue the relationship after the fact from a business development perspective.
Exactly. So what would you say the biggest challenge in delivering sales skills to non-salespeople would be then, since they're so different?
Well, I would say it's the fear that I just mentioned. A lot of non-salespeople think that selling is distasteful, it's confrontational, and they just need help understanding that it's actually not only potentially financially rewarding, but it can be very personally rewarding as well. I mean, the trick is to help them get past this language barrier that I mentioned earlier. Once they understand that the word sell is really nothing more than delivering good service and being compensated fairly, then they tend to relax and actually embrace the training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So give us, again, the example of the kind of people that, walk us through a little bit of a...
For example, I'm working with a large law firm right now. I sent them the standard sales proposal, and my sponsor, got back to me and said, I can't forward this on to the partners. And I'm like, well, why not? And he said, well, they're going to be offended. And I'm like, offended? That's an unusual choice of words. I can see maybe resistant or hesitant, but offended? And he said, well, selling's beneath them.
Oh, yeah, lawyers, of course. I've heard that many times before.
And so I thought, well, we just spent, 2 hours previously doing an exploration of their issues, and clearly their objective is to bring in more business for the law firm. So I thought, okay, this is a cultural issue. What word do you use in-house instead of the word sell? Well, that's business development. Oh, okay. So that was literally a search and replacing word, and suddenly there's no more selling. It's all business development. There are no more customers. There are prospective clients, and there are not companies. There are firms. So I have the proposal done by the end of the day. I send it back, and boom, the guy's like, this is fantastic. So I think the biggest challenge is just getting people comfortable with their perception of selling and then helping them adjust to it so that they understand within their own world that, well, quite frankly, it's something that needs to be done.
Yeah. Well, yes, it's something that needs to be done, but again, it doesn't also go back to, well, why do you need me to do it? Why do I care? Why should I be incented to do that? I mean, isn't that one of the challenges, too?
Well, I can tell you, in the law firm's case, if you want to be partner, you bring in business.
Yeah.
But even let me just think of someone else we're working with right now. Okay, another one. So working with a company that does outsourced medical management. And so you have directors of pharmacies that are on site that represent the outsourced company, and they manage the pharmacy for them. So quite frankly, they've structured it such that it's not only lucrative for them, but it's allowing them to advance their careers. So, in today's world where every cent counts, you really don't have the luxury of just having segmented organizational units. People have to start sharing tasks. Of course, people maximize their strengths. I don't expect the people I train to go and become professional salespeople. That takes a very unique individual. But they can have the sales skills in place to help enhance the selling experience for the whole company.
Good point. Good point. So how does sales training for these customer-facing staff people help the direct sales force?
Good question, right? What's in it for me?
Or do they look at it as competition?
No. In fact, you want to look at it this way. So if you enable your non-sales staff with business development skills, you're really increasing the whole sales force, but without increasing any headcount. So think of all the employees that are currently they have strong customer relationships that are in place. You can capitalize on that for additional revenues into your own accounts. So, as a direct salesperson, how would you feel if you got an email or a call from an on-site project manager or a customer support rep that said, hey, I just talked to Joe Smith, and he said, you know what, there's a major project coming up, and here's the deadline associated with that project, and here's the consequence if they miss it. Oh, and by the way, he told me that if they complete this project ahead of schedule, he's going to get a bonus. So now you just got a compelling event, a timeline, a consequence, and the personal win. So that's the kind of information that's invaluable. And quite frankly, oftentimes it's only obtainable by that insider non-sales type. A lot of these people are viewed as the trusted advisor. They're not the sales guy. And because of that position, they can get some really serious intel. The bottom line is that by training these post-sales staff to look for more revenue, you are positively influencing the customer relationship cycle.
Customer relationship cycle, I like that. And I'd like you to elaborate on that if you would.
Sure. It's the customer relationship cycle is it's something we use to help illustrate the customer's relationship to the salesperson and the vendor company throughout the sales process. So what it does is it charts the prospect's level of interest and trust throughout the whole process. So I think the best metaphor I can think of is a farming metaphor, right? So your salesperson comes in, you spend a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of corporate resources to build trust and credibility with your prospect. Eventually you get the deal, and you quote-unquote, plant the sale, if you will. But then most salespeople I know, they move on to the next fresh field, right? It's then up to your non-sales people to properly tend that crop, nurture it, bring that business relationship to full harvest, and take the bounty. So if this is done correctly, the customer not only maintains that trust for the salesperson because the relationship is continued, but they also build a trust for the entire organization. And what that does is it creates an atmosphere in which your customer is now more apt to purchase additional products and services. So that goes back to what you talked about earlier. What's in it for the salesperson? A continued, strong relationship that is going to keep them open to additional products and services. In short, the account revenue is maximized. It really, there's a clear and simple message. And that's, if you want to maximize revenue, make sure that you invest in managing that sales process at all points in the cycle. Not just the beginning, also after the initial sale.
Okay. So that makes perfect sense. However, the customer always still likes to have the interface with their salesperson because that's where the first relationship was built, and that's probably the strongest one. And it helps to have these other relationships as well. But do you think, or have you seen this kind of a model where there's a sales team, let's say, a post-sales team doing a lot of the work now after the farmer did his thing, right?
Right.
Do you think that's taken as an invitation by the salesperson to ignore their customer now?
Well,
at least to do that?
I don't, because anyone who's worth their salt knows that you don't ignore your prospect because that's where the money's coming from. And what I'm quite frankly seeing is that salespeople are being incented more and more nowadays for new revenue. And so, I've seen everything from they're not being paid on any maintenance, to some maintenance, to to any revenue after the sale. It just really depends on the organization. But to me, all it does, as long as at the end of the day they're called an account manager for a reason, they manage all of the resources associated with that account. This is just an additional resource that they can use to generate more revenue.
Mm-hmm. And commission's a big part of that too. I mean, I keep going back to what's in it for me. I mean, come on, if you're not paying me, if I'm behind the scenes somewhere, if I'm not getting paid or compensated somehow to go through the extra effort to sell on behalf of these sales guys out there who are making the big bucks, that's sarcasm there, but that's the mentality, right? Then why am I going to do this? I want a bonus or I want something if I help leverage a sale.
Okay, now this is going to sound probably foreign to 99% of the audience, including you, Russ, but you have to take yourself out of your own sales mentality, right? We salespeople are pretty much motivated, correct me if I'm wrong, by two things: money and pretty much competition, right? The desire to win. That's how you can identify a really good salesperson, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So, believe it or not, these individuals are really motivated by attaboys, right? A pat on the back, that wooden plaque, best prospector of the month. They really, it's their personality type to really be rewarded by such things. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, money's definitely it. There's no doubt about it. But it's not always as much of a prime driver as you think it is, as it is for a salesperson.
Right. And I know a lot of companies will include their non-salespeople in their president's club. They get voted in by the salespeople, saying who helped you the most during the year, and they give them, end-of-year type awards and maybe even invitations to the President's Club.
Absolutely. And listen, the organizations that do this right, don't get me wrong, it's not that the wooden plaque's the only way to go. They have to adjust their compensation strategy accordingly, but it's well worth it.
Oh, yeah, because they're getting more money. They're getting more revenue.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the funny thing that cracks me up. You mean I have to give people more money to help us sell?
Right.
Hello, brainstorm, you're making more money, so yeah, it's a percentage of increased sales, not coming out of the bottom line. I mean, it's not coming out of your cost structure, per se. It's coming out of revenue that you otherwise wouldn't have obtained.
It doesn't it? And you'd be amazed how many support issues are proactively addressed because the relationship stays strong as opposed to somebody coming around a year later and checking in and not even knowing what's going on.
Right. And, one of the benefits of this whole thing, I don't know if you're going to get into this or not, but allow me to steal some thunder if I may, but it's just, something I think it's time is to mention now, is that the relationship, what happens when salespeople leave a company and they take their clients with them, it's the company's fault. And the reason it's the company's fault is not because they didn't have a good, rock-solid non-disclosure agreement or some other kind of agreement that says, a non-compete clause, you can't take our database. Everyone does that. I'm sorry. They're going to hide it. They're going to steal it. They're going to, be subtle about it. Some aren't as subtle as others, but they're going to take it. The real question is, does the customer really want to move over to the new company with the salesman? And the reason I said it's the company's fault is because they let that happen. They let that happen because they let the relationship exist only between the salesperson and the client, not a sales team. So what you're saying, Adam, is that in doing this, you have a whole sales team now. You have many people talking to this customer who they've built many different relationships with.
Exactly. That's what I was saying earlier, is that not only do you build trust and credibility with the salesperson, the account manager, but now there's this perception of trust and credibility with the whole company, the whole vendor, if you will.
Right. So then if the salesperson leaves your company and then talks to the customer later, a month later saying, hey, I moved over to a competitor, we got a much better deal, they're not going to be as inclined to want to leave. It's like, well, I know your contract guy. I know, we got this whole understanding going on here. I know your tech support people. I got the cell phone number of this guy. I can call him up any time, and he helps me. Dude, it's just not worth it for me to move. And that's so valuable to companies, and they don't realize that a lot of times.
I agree with you. And I don't, again, because we're not usually down in the trenches delivering the service, right, or installing the components, whatever it may be. But those relationships are incredibly strong. Right, because these are the people that actually deliver the service, product, etc. And these are the ones that there's this perception of. I keep coming back to this, a perception of trust, which I don't think should be exploited, but I do think it should be capitalized on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right, and that's right. You capitalize on it, right? And I mean, let's face it. You've earned the trust.
Yep.
And it's like anything. You can't sell to somebody and not, support them after the fact and have the audacity to go back and disrespect them basically and try to sell them something a year later, because you haven't earned the right to do that. And I tell this story a lot where I was using a cell phone service for many years because multiple companies I work for used the same one, so I just carried it over. It was under my name, and I mean I've had it for like 4 or 5 years, and even longer. And I think it was 6 or 7 years. And I just didn't want to change my cell phone because back in those days, you had to redo your whole phone book and everything. You can't just take a SIM chip out and replace that. So it was just a big burden, and I didn't want to bother. And finally, one day I said, I hate this phone. I hate the service. I never really liked it. And I called to see when my thing expired, and they were trying to sell me all kinds of, new deals and everything. I said, nope, too late. It's been 7 or so years. You've never once contacted me for something that would benefit me. Now that I'm leaving, it's too late, So timing is very important there. Listen, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to hear more from Adam Halpern, president and founder of Soft Sell Training, and we're talking about generate more revenue using your non-sales force. All that and more when we return to Sales Talk after this.
The bottom line in business talk. Voice America Business.
Okay, you've got a great lead management or CRM system. Now how about getting your sales team to use it? CardScan encourages user adoption because it makes data entry easy. How? CardScan eliminates the manual entry of contact data because it reads and pulls it from email signatures and paper business cards. Get your sales team off their keyboards and onto championing your CRM system with CardScan. CardScan makes data entry easy. Learn more about CardScan online and take advantage of our special offer exclusively for Sales Talk listeners at cardscan.com/easy. That's cardscan.com/easy. If your sales reps aren't making quota, or if you have difficulties managing your customer relations, or if you just want a world-class sales organization, then call Peak Sales Consulting. We can improve your customer acquisition and retention by working with your management and sales teams to develop your customer relationships and selling skills. For your sales and CRM consulting and training needs, or for a speaker at your next event, call us at 702-655-5652 or visit us at www.peaksalesconsulting.com. Peak Sales Consulting, a unique combination of sales and CRM expertise. More and more business people recognize the importance of spirituality in their work. How do busy professionals discover what rings true for them? Embracing the Journey with Karen Humphrey-Salek explores what it means to be spiritually fulfilled in business and how to integrate spiritual direction into a career. Expert guests, authors, and inspiring speakers join Karen every week to discuss such issues as honesty, compassion, generosity, ethics, and integrity in the workplace. Take a positive step forward to greater life balance. Tune into Embracing the Journey with Karen Humphrey-Salek, broadcasting every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Business Channel, the bottom line in business talk.
Keeping you a step ahead of the changing world of business. This is Voice America Business.
Welcome back to Sales Talk with Russ Lombardo. If you have a question or comment, dial toll-free 866-472-5790. Now back to the show. Here's Russ.
Hi, and welcome back. You're listening to Sales Talk. I'm your host, Russ Lombardo, and my guest today is Adam Halpern, president and founder of Soft Sell Training. And we're talking today about how to generate more revenue using your non-sales force. And right before the break, I was just using a personal anecdote about a company I had used for my cell phone for many, many years. And when they got wind of the fact, or word basically from me, that I was switching to a competitor, all of a sudden, all the offers started coming in about, what they could do and their discounts and all this kind of stuff. And in actuality, the discounts were actually higher than, or the discounted rate was higher than the company I was moving to. so it didn't help anyway. But even if it was better, I wouldn't have gone with them because I was just insulted that they never even cared enough to offer me anything better during the 6 or 7 years that I used them until they found out I was trying to leave. And during the break, Adam said he wanted to build on that with his own little story. So let me ask you, Adam, do you have one to contribute to this?
Well, what I wanted to say was, there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. And so, just case in point, I recently needed to get some more toner for my printer, and I call into one of these printing companies, and in order to even reach the tech support people, I had to then first prove that I had whatever kind of extended warranty in place. And so that literally there's somebody's job to be the gatekeeper and allow me forward or not according to my service agreement. So pretty annoying conversation, got to pull back the printer, look for the serial number, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, we get this all done, and he basically says, okay, I'm going to pass you through. Oh, before you move on, do you need any more printing supplies, such as, toner, cartridge, et cetera, whatever? And, by that time I was so pissed off at him, I'm like, there's no way in heck I'm going to buy anything from you. So what you have to understand is there's a time and a place for this kind of stuff.
Right.
I'll use the same scenario in a technical support situation in which that tech support rep solves the issue, and at that moment in time, they are at the peak of a high interest level with that prospect, with that customer, and that's when they're the hero. It's what better time right there to say, hey, do you have any other projects going on right now in your environment? And do some exploratory questioning. Mm-hmm. So, again, there's a time and a place, and this is what we talk about in our seminars, but you just need to understand, as I said, there's the right way to do it.
Timing, yeah, it's all about timing, yep. So this whole model of selling through your non-sales force, this whole model, what kinds of organizations and industries would you say would benefit most from that?
Well, I know that, we in sales, we tend to define a company by, its revenue, but for this kind of approach, it's less about the industry and really more about how they approach selling, how their sales force is structured. So, in general, we tend to work with about approximately 3 different types of organizations, right? The ones that have a predominantly hunter-based sales force. I talked about this earlier, where they are mostly concentrated on bringing in new business. The salesperson makes a deal and then, cuts and runs for the next one. So you end up with the prospect then customer feeling abandoned, and that customer relationship cycle then is broken. So that's a great opportunity to train the people that own the account after the fact to continue the business development after the initial sale. So strong hunter-based selling organizations. And then we've worked with organizations that have a strong, initial sales force and then account management post-sales force, but they have ongoing services or projects in which there's a project manager or a program manager that's intricately involved in the ongoing delivery of the service. They may even be embedded on site. These are people that have a tremendous opportunity to gather intel, if not upsell and cross-sell. So 2 different sales forces, both of which can benefit from this. The last one I had spoken about earlier, very interesting. Any of these large professional firms, doctors, lawyers, attorneys, obviously, insurance companies, these are people that generally don't see themselves as salespeople, yet selling and business development is a critical component of their day-to-day working. So different kind of an approach, but definitely just as critical.
Absolutely. Well, this is very important to do this, without a doubt, and I think all of our listeners would be in agreement with that. So it could, though, take a long time to do this. So how can organizations expedite this transition of their non-sales staff to a business development role?
That's a great question. It's definitely not something that happens overnight. I'd love to say that we can come in and sprinkle pixie dust over everyone's head and poof, it's done. That's just not the case. The truth is, if you want true behavioral change, if you want organizational change, there are 3 primary components that you have to have in place in order for this to work at least well, if not perfectly. And that is, you have to have correct hiring practices. And by that I mean do some upfront analysis, do some behavioral assessments, right? Make sure that you have the right person in the right job in the first place. And then once you're comfortable with that, that's where the employee training comes into place, Right? You have the right person in the right spot. Now enable them correctly with the right skills, the right knowledge to go after what they're supposed to be doing. And then finally, you have to have management and coaching, right? You have the right people. They've been given the right knowledge. Now they need the right mentoring, coaching, growth, shared best practices, experiences to help them maximize their jobs on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. Missing any one of those three components, and you'll still get this done if you want to, but it'll be much slower.
Sure. Now, here's a case where you would always be missing the first one, and that's existing employees. So I'm assuming that a lot of our listeners out there who are managers of organizations, sales or whatever, and especially the business owners out there listening, are saying, this is great, but you're talking about correct hiring practices. I have a staff of 30 people who I want to start doing this with. So is employee training and the management coaching, is that enough to really get over that hurdle? Are you saying that did I hire the wrong people? Or did I find that out? Do I get rid of them? Do I replace them? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely.
What do we do with our existing assets?
For sure. And the same assessment that you can use to make sure that you've hired the person in the right place is what you would use for your incumbent sales force or your incumbent support force, right? So it gives you a chance to analyze the people that you're currently managing, find their strengths and weaknesses, and then you can pinpoint where they're going to need stronger coaching, mentoring, etc. So don't feel like, I've got to go dump my whole service industry or my whole service folks because we're shifting this perspective. That's not the case at all. But doing some kind of analysis of who you have on your team, what their strengths and weaknesses are, will get you just leaps and bounds ahead when you're trying to make this kind of a change happen in your company.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit more about the management coaching. Can you elaborate a little bit more on exactly what that would entail?
Well, there's two components. One is, you're starting to talk about selling, right? And managing the sales process is different than managing, say, a service process, right? There's this whole idea of understanding if you've qualified your prospect up front correctly. Does it warrant the company's resources being brought in? Those kinds of questions these people are probably not used to dealing with. Not only that, but if you're on the management side of this and you don't have sales training or sales management training in your background, you're going to need some coaching there yourself. You're going to need your own training on how to manage your people.
Yep, right, okay. And what if the management doesn't know how to do this?
That's exactly why you need management training,
right?
And so, a good organization is going to not only offer you training for your salespeople, but training for your management. And if they're worth anything, they have some kind of assessment in place to help you qualify and get the right people in place. Case in point, the one we use, Fascinating Personality Assessment, it is literally designed to measure if a non-sales person is more or less apt to initiate a conversation to look for new business. It's called the Meeting People Questionnaire. Fascinating psychological instrument.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be. So with the employee training, you're saying enabling the person with the right selling skills to be successful, and if they don't have that, that's basically creating the right selling skills to help them become successful, right?
Sure. So a lot of people ask me, at the end of the day, what are we really talking about here, right? And what I'm really talking about is the core sales skills that really you'll see in any sales training class, all right? The gems that really, in my opinion, cross over all of these sales methodologies that you hear about, and but delivered in a way that is palatable to this audience.
But isn't it missing? Aren't like cold calling wouldn't be something that they would do? So.
It depends. It depends on who's delivering the final product, the service, etc. More often than not, you're talking about adapting or understanding behavioral styles. You're talking about overcoming objections. You're talking about dealing with difficult people. You're talking about asking open-ended questions. The basic selling skills that we probably just live and breathe and don't even realize we do anymore, but it's foreign to these people. Right? They are used to yes/no questions. Is it broken? No. Good. Mm-hmm. Right? They're not used to, I see that, you have this in your environment. What else are you all working on right now?
Right. The open-ended.
They have to be taught to do that.
Right. Okay. So, there are things that, they're not necessarily doing the close, I mean, that's another part of it, I guess, that we didn't talk about is selling. You're talking about the act of selling, but not actually getting the sale. So it seems to me that these people would grease the skid so that the salesperson come in and close the sale and do the transaction itself. They actually do the close and handle the deal.
I would say there's a full spectrum. It's kind of like a bell-shaped curve. On the two ends, you have people that are simply just doing lead generation without looking for opportunity. Mm-hmm. And on the other end, you have people that close the deal. And the people I work with there particularly are like software consultants or really any consultants that are on site, and they can sell additional billing hours or find additional products themselves. They're basically responsible for that quota. Mm-hmm. The people in the middle are what you talked about. So mostly it's understanding how to act accordingly in an upsell, cross-sell situation, ask the right questions, and find the right opportunities.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes perfect sense. As you have been doing this whole show so far, we have to stop for another break, and only for a couple minutes, though. And we are talking to Adam Halpern, president and founder of Soft Sell Training, and our show today is Generate More Revenue Using Your Non-Sales Force. We're going to talk about that and a lot more when we return to Sales Talk after this.
The bottom line in business talk. Voice America Business.
If your sales reps aren't making quota, or if you have difficulties managing your customer relations, or if you just want a world-class sales organization, then call Peak Sales Consulting. We can improve your customer acquisition and retention by working with your management and sales teams to develop your customer relationships and selling skills. For your sales and CRM consulting and training needs, or for a speaker at your next event, call us at 702-655-5652 or visit us at www.peaksalesconsulting.com. Peak Sales Consulting, a unique combination of sales and CRM expertise.
Hey kid, over here, inside your radio. Name's Ralph. I'm an energy hog. Hey, if you're gonna waste energy in your home, I'm gonna pig out on it. Anyway, I got a deal for you. There's this new website called energyhog.org. Forget about it. It teaches kids how to get rid of us energy hogs. So you promise not to log on to energyhog.org, and I promise not to eat your radio. Deal?
A public service announcement brought to you by the U.S. Department of Energy and the Ad Council.
Okay, you've got a great lead management or CRM system. Now how about getting your sales team to use it? CardScan encourages user adoption because it makes data entry easy. How? CardScan eliminates the manual entry of contact data because it reads and pulls it from email signatures and paper business cards. Get your sales team off their keyboards and onto championing your CRM system with CardScan. CardScan makes data entry easy. Learn more about CardScan online and take advantage of our special offer exclusively for Sales Talk listeners at cardscan.com/easy. That's cardscan.com/easy.
Tune in every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Time for The Growth Strategist with Aldana Ambler. On the show, Aldana and some of today's top business professionals will discuss some of today's most pressing business issues that hold you, the business owner, back. Aldana will also give you 21 ways to grow with her list of growth strategies. Grow smart, grow profit, and grow your business with Aldana Ambler and the Growth Strategist every Tuesday at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, right here on the Bottom Line in Business Talk, Voice America Business.
The bottom line in business talk, Voice America Business.
Welcome back to Sales Talk with Russ Lombardo. If you have a question or comment, dial toll-free 866-472-5790. Now back to the show. Here's Russ.
Hello, and welcome back one more time. You're listening to Sales Talk, and I'm your host, Russ Lombardo. And my guest today is Adam Halpern, president and founder of Soft Sell Training. And we are talking about generate more revenue using your non-sales force. Well, Adam, what kind of results can a company anticipate by implementing a program such as this where you're training your non-sales force to help sell?
Spoken like a true salesperson. What are the bottom line results?
The bottom line results.
Not that I ever get asked that, in an executive meeting. So A lot, actually. But the key component here is if you implement the sales enablement program correctly, which is what we talked about earlier, those three components, correct hiring, correct employee enablement, correct mentoring and coaching, you can expect more sales leads, you can expect more repeat business, deeper customer loyalty, and better organizational communication. So we'll take them one at a time. More sales leads. We talked about this earlier. I would say the majority of the people I train are out there in the field, basically feet on the street, looking for new opportunities. And then they bring it back to the sales force, and they've been taught how to look for a compelling event, how to ask the right questions, so that you have a very hot lead to move on. So it's just a matter of making sure that those people understand how to do what they need to do. More repeat business, talked about that earlier. If your customer has a stronger perception of trust and credibility, not just with you, but with the organization, well, now they are much more apt to stay with you and to be open to hearing about new products, new services, upsell, and cross-sell, right? What does that cause? Deeper loyalty. And so in today's world, in which so many things have been commoditized, a lot of times it comes down to really the relationship between the customer and the salesperson and the organization that makes the difference, that keeps somebody from moving. And in fact, personally, I can say that there have been times when I have not moved simply because I really like the organization I work with. And maybe it's $1 more than somewhere else, but so what? It's a pleasure to do business with them. So this last point, the organizational dynamics and communication, I know that sounds wishy-washy. It's actually huge. Right? Once people outside of the direct sales force start understanding what it is to sell, then when they start hearing things, which they hear all the time, by the way, which is, hey, we pay your salaries. They love hearing that one, by the way. Or, you know, it's all about sales. Well, remember, when you're on the receiving end of that, it doesn't sound so sexy. So once they understand really what's involved and that they all can start sharing that experience, then you have a true team selling environment, and that will drive revenue.
Yes, yeah. And it's very hard for companies to instill that team selling environment, too, because by very nature of organizations, they are kind of adverse to each other because they're doing different things. I mean, I worked for a company where accounting hated sales because they had to cut these large checks for them every so often because, you know, big commission, right? And I had to keep reminding them, hey, the month before, they got almost nothing because sales were bad, and you didn't say, oh, poor them. You know, so it goes both ways. And, you know, and while they're scrimping for food last month, you got your same paycheck every single week, you know, regardless of how you perform. So, you know, don't begrudge them a big check now and then.
I understand what you're saying, and you're definitely playing the role of the salesperson correctly. Well, they don't get it.
This from, you know.
They don't get it. When you say that sales pays your paycheck, they're like, no, they don't. I get it from finance. I get it from accounting.
Yeah, right. Well, I wasn't even saying that. I'm just saying when, you know, you get your check every week, period. The sales guy gets a big commission this month and a crappy one last month, and next month, who knows? So, you know, it's not that when you're writing the checks for them from accounting, right? You know, they're payroll, rather, HR and stuff. You know, they're paying right now the commission checks. And I literally had someone complain to me, like, this guy's making, like, a huge commission. I said, yeah, he really worked hard this month. Yeah. Yeah, but this is huge. I go, yeah. And they kept, like, they couldn't believe it. And, like, I said, do you not want to do this? Well, no, but do you realize how big it is? I go, do you realize the month before he made nothing? You know, knock it off. And
the answer, by the way, is no, they don't realize that.
They don't.
And,
exactly,
and so
yeah.
a key component of delivering this training is talking about the sales process right up front. Mm-hmm. You know, first, what do they think it is? And then, okay, let's talk through what is a day in the life of a salesperson? They have no idea.
Right.
In their mind, you pick up the phone, you take the order, and you hang up. And you get paid a lot of money for it.
Right. And you go out to go to lunches, and you go out to play golf. Yeah. Right. And you said that in the beginning, too. A big part of the training is to educate non-salespeople as to what selling is all about, selling in your company. Yep. Because, it's different. It's similar in a lot of ways, but it is different in each one. So, all right, let me ask you this so we can start wrapping this up here. Speaking of training, what are the characteristics someone should look for when they're selecting a training firm to deliver this type of, I'll call it specialized training, sales training?
Well, okay, this is critical. And, I'll try and keep it as concise as I can. If a training company can address those three elements we talked about earlier, which is correct assessments of the employees, training the employees, and coaching them correctly, then you're really only getting a partial solution. So, keep that in mind when you're looking for someone to help deliver this kind of training. But the biggest mistake I see happen out there is when you think that you can train a non-salesperson the same way you train a direct salesperson. That's just not the case. If you train a salesperson with the same testosterone-driven, high-energy style that a hunter salesperson loves, a non-salesperson is going to mentally check out and be very resistant to material. So you have to deliver that content in the language and worldview that they're going to be comfortable with. And I would just be very cautious of any sales training firm that says, we can also train your non-sales people, as part of the total package. Don't get me wrong, there are some great direct sales training companies out there, and you should use them for your direct sales force. But they are notorious for trying to fit a square peg in a round hole when it comes to training employees outside the direct sales force.
Are there companies that you've seen that do both well?
They're like also-rans, right? You'll go to their website and you'll see that, everything they do for the direct sales force, oh, and by the way, will also.
Okay. So you're saying that's kind of a specialty training.
It's absolutely.
And
I don't like the word boutique, but you'll hear that word a lot.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that makes perfect sense because guys like me who do sales training for sales organizations, and I teach salespeople how to be salespeople, and I teach sales management how to manage them. And what you're saying makes perfect sense, and I love it. I think it's great. But you know what? I don't think I could sit there and teach clerks how to sell. I mean, I can make a course to do that. Don't get me wrong, but that's not where my head is at. So I can see that would be more of a specialty type of training.
Absolutely.
That makes perfect sense.
And in fact, we've built a network of direct sales trainers so that when those opportunities come along, we hook them up, accordingly from geographically or for whatever they're looking for, because that's just, in our particular instance, that's just not what we do. And we don't want to. I mean, we specialize in this thing, and we do it quite well.
Makes perfect sense. Anything else to look for?
No, that's the most important, is just make sure that, this isn't just something they throw in after the fact, because if you think about the percentage of people that are in your company that are direct sales versus not, there's a rather large percentage that are not.
Gotcha. Yep, you're right. Well, listen, this has been fantastic. I'm afraid this is all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank Adam Halpern of Soft Sell Training for being such a terrific guest, and I'd like to thank our listeners for tuning in. Thanks for listening to Sales Talk. See you next time.